Welcome to BAM, the show conquering sameness. In the land of LinkedIn, where a once vibrant community lies dormant, a new force emerges. The fearful cricketer, the villain of silence, chirping through inactive feeds, drawing power from every dead thread and ghosted comment, but hope isn't lost. By day, Tony Albrecht is a LinkedIn strategist and content architect. But when the scroll gets sluggish and engagement falters, he becomes Loda, the guardian of resonance and reach. With the power to craft standout content and spark conversations, he's reigniting feeds and revitalizing engagement. I'm Bam Man, here to narrate this quest through the quiet corners of the land of LinkedIn, where stories are waiting to be told. This is BAM, the show conquering sameness, one platform at a time.
To mess with this city.
BAM!
Bam! I'm Bam Man, conquering sameness one platform at a time.
BAM. Now, most LinkedIn content gets scrolled past, not because it's wrong, but because it's cloaked in invisibility. But Loda doesn't just post. He plans, he crafts, he positions with precision. And in doing so, he's managed to flip the script on engagement. Loda, what's cloaking so much LinkedIn content and invisibility? And what's the shift that turns it into a scroll stopper?
The reason that so much LinkedIn content fails to reach many eyeballs at all is a matter of the fact that we all learned LinkedIn the wrong way. And by that, I mean, regardless of what industry you're in, and certainly if you're in the legal space, you learn LinkedIn as the place where you either announce when you get a new job, or you go when you need a new job, or you say you're thrilled to announce. Maybe you share a firm press release every now and then. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but none of those things are particularly interesting. And so on the LinkedIn platform, we have a situation where the algorithm optimizes for what is interesting. But because we all learned that on LinkedIn, we are effectively supposed to be the personified versions of those bad headshots, you know, with the gray background and the bad hair.
You mean the ones we took at Olin Mills when we were in high school?
Exactly. We think about our content as needing to align with that. Now, so the second part of your question, how do we shift what we're doing to be able to cut through the noise and stop people scrolling? I lean into being real. You know, I say that authenticity is a word that gets used a lot. And I think of where we want to be in terms of authenticity as we don't want to be too authentic, which is to say we don't want to say everything, but we want everything that we say to be true to us. So, you know, when we're posting on LinkedIn, when we're showing up, there is so much value, given the way we learned it, in saying things that are really true to us, things that we really believe, things that we really care about. And given that baseline level of, say, interestingness, is that a word? I think that's a word.
It is now.
If you're willing and able to show up in a way that's 10% more interesting than a press release, you have access to a disproportionate amount of attention, because we all have LinkedIn profiles, right? Just about everybody does, because we feel like we all need them. So there is a store of attention gathered on the platform that just very few people have been able to access.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, Loda, but what I'm hearing is LinkedIn is not a bulletin board, and LinkedIn is not a place to keep your resume. LinkedIn is a place to be yourself, open up, and communicate with people. So if good content grabs, great content stays top of mind, you seem to be engineering for both, studying patterns, the delivery, the timing, writing with the reply in mind. What are your go-to tactics for building engagement into a post, and how do you structure content to invite real interaction?
The answer to this question is part structure and part content of what goes into the structure. So from a structural perspective, I think of a LinkedIn post as effectively having three parts. You have your hook at the beginning, you have your dismount at the end, and you have your core, which is basically the space between. And while 80% of your words are probably going to be in that core of your post, your hook and your dismount are as important, if not more so, when it comes to attracting attention. Where your hook is going to be those first couple lines before you get to see more. And the dismount is, the way I think about it, the point where you're inviting folks to join you for conversation in the comments. The way I think about LinkedIn posts is that they are effectively shameless attempts to get people to engage with you in the comments. So I try to keep posts aerodynamic in the sense that I try to keep them moving down toward that dismount. And then I want to make the dismount evocative. I try to use either a mic drop, sort of an evocative statement, a strong stance, or a question that provokes a reflexive yes or no response. So simplest form of that might be something like, does that make sense? Or the classic, do you agree? I don't have to think about it. I can just, you ask that question and I know whether I agree, yes or no. So from a structural perspective, those are the big things. Paying attention to hooks that, let's say, build a little bit of curiosity or pull people into a story from the beginning, and then dismounts that invite people and evoke a response that make them more likely to click one of your reaction buttons and leave a comment. The content piece of this that applies across all three of those different parts of a post, the biggest thing is being specific. That so much of the content that we see out there is relatively generic, vanilla. There are things that a lot of different people could have written. And whether you are a proven expert in your field with decades of experience or a new grad who just finished college and is getting your first job, you are the expert of your own experience. And so when I'm working with a client or working on my own stuff, I'm always thinking, where's the post here? Where's the real key insight that we're building this post around? Something that's very specific to our experience. And then what are the details around that?
A lot of people would call that the thesis statement. Is that what you're referring to? Your core thought, your thesis statement? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So that thesis statement, that core insight that you're building the post, that's specific to a given experience that's leading you to write this post. Often those thesis statements are going to be fairly, general may not be the best word, let's say universal. That a lot of those things, a lot of those truths that we write posts that work around, they work because the insights are so relatable, that they're things that we can readily see the use for in our own lives or reflective of our own experiences. The trick to writing posts that attract positive attention and engagement is combining that, say, universal thesis idea or insight with the specific details of that moment, that exchange, that story, to make it yours and to make it something that nobody else could have written because they don't have those specific details to tell.
A new trend I've noticed, and this is off question here, but I wanted to ask it because we're talking about content, and is this new thing where I looked it up on ChatGPT, and this is what ChatGPT says. And they just basically copy pasted in and hope. And it's like, I don't know if you remember, I think I want to write a post about this. Do you remember that old website? And it's probably still around. People would ask just the dumbest questions in Facebook. And there was a website called Let Me Google That For You. Do you remember that? And you would just
Yes.
stick that in the comments and be like, dude, why don't you just go Google it yourself? I'm getting to the point, not a lot, and I hate to be the person who complains about formats because I always criticize those people, but I'm seeing more and more people who are literally just saying, I looked this up on ChatGPT. Here's what it said. Here's my post. And then there's no humanity. There's no reality from there. So I definitely see that. And we could talk so much about story arc. We could talk about, here's what I'm about to teach you. Here's what I'm teaching you. Here's what I just taught you. You're literally using the formula that is the number one communication formula, whether it's spoken in front of thousands or written to dozens. It's simply, here's what I'm going to tell you, why you should listen. Here's what I'm telling you. And then here's what I just told you and what you should do with it. It's a very simple process. Mm-hmm. And the reason I mentioned that is, I looked up ChatGPT, and here's what it said. Does not follow that formula. It is not a natural communication formula. It's almost like reverting back to, hey, I went down to the library and I grabbed you the encyclopedia. I turned it to page 37 because I know you were wondering what wombats were like. We're almost returning to that place of not filtering, providing, and communicating, but simply just passing on information. And I think that And I hope you would agree that that's a dangerous place to be when you're trying to cultivate relationships.
Absolutely. And, when I was preaching about this stuff 3 years ago, what I was saying was, if you are writing posts that are basically just Google searches that you've plopped down into LinkedIn, that's not going to work. And today it's what you're saying, Dennis, is that if you are posting things that are effectively just ChatGPT answering a question, it's not going to work. And it goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that idea of being authentic, of being genuine, of being yourself. The AI and the GPTs are incredibly powerful. They're so
tools.
Useful. I rely on them constantly, but I don't rely on them to do the thinking or to do the work. They do a lot of drafting for me. They do a lot of reflecting, but they're only going to be as good as their inputs are. And so the best stuff that you're going to see on LinkedIn is stuff that it very well may be drafted by GPT or by AI, but you're not going to be able to tell.
Right. It's filtered. I always say filter it through humanity, because if you don't filter it through humanity, then what do you have? You're just listening to robots.
Yeah, and I think one other detail there that is important here, and this is something I'm talking to my clients about frequently, is to your point, Dennis, about those posts, is when we see something that is clearly ChatGPT, we lose interest almost immediately because we know that this is just the robot, doing its thing.
Right.
And we're not particularly interested in what the robot has to say. We're interested in what people have to say.
Very much agree. We're going to be doing probably a series of SEO. Basically, it's the concept of the next series. I think will be kind of like they took Paradise and took Paradise and paved it with a parking lot.
Yep.
I feel like we're taking SEO and we're paving it with GEO right now, and with what's happening. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time in there, but there's a lot of good stuff there. Let me ask you this as we keep talking about, because obviously the key to success in LinkedIn land is not great content. It's not showing up. If you're successful, you have conversations. People are communicating with you. They're reposting, they're liking, they're commenting. Heck, let them argue in the comments, doesn't hurt you any. But with that being said, when you post something and the conversation isn't ignited, you post it to crickets, and maybe you're just so amazing it hasn't happened for years, and you might have to ask a friend what this is like. I don't know. But that's a little bit of sarcasm. You'll learn enough about to me. 90% is what I'm saying is sarcasm. But what do you do to reignite a post that you put out there and you're like, this is going to kill it? And then 30 minutes later, it's crickets. And an hour later, it's crickets. Do you have things that you do to try to revive a post that you've put out there, or some content that you put out there that isn't moving at all, or at least in the way you anticipated it to?
That's a good question. So to pull the lens back just a little bit, one thing that I've tried to work hard on for myself and for folks that I serve is detaching how we feel about ourselves from how our posts perform.
That's a good one.
I describe myself not as a marketer. I'm a lawyer who accidentally got good at LinkedIn after ignoring the platform through 12 years practicing. I moved to Canada thanks to my Canadian wife. I left the practice after being on the cusp of making partner in my hometown of St. Louis, and started paying attention to LinkedIn after taking a business development role. And at the time when I started paying attention to LinkedIn, I had extremely low expectations. But then, took a particular course. I started getting more active. The platform kind of opened up in this new way for me. And as I started to post, very quickly, an advantage that I had on LinkedIn was that I did not care what anybody who was looking at my post thought about me. The way I thought about it was like, there are only about 5 people in the world whose opinions really matter to me when it comes to my self-worth. None of those people are reading my LinkedIn posts. And it wasn't to say that I'm out there throwing grenades or trying to upset people. I was writing about creativity at the time. It was pretty friendly stuff. But just that it was such a liberating idea to say that if you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's fine too. And I remember putting out a post in November of 2021, not long after I started showing up on the platform, that got 112 views, 0 reactions, 0 comments. And that wasn't that long ago that I posted that. For so many of us, we sort of live or die by the post. And if one post does really well, then we sort of adjust our expectations for what our next post should do. And we lose sight of the bigger picture, which is that, number one, this platform is a roller coaster. Like, posts go up, posts go down. And there are so many variables that will affect how a post behaves that it's just almost impossible to predict. A second point there is something you just touched on, Dennis, just how your posts perform. It probably matters less than we tend to think, because what we're really trying to do is have those conversations and build relationships. And so much of that work does not happen with our posts. A lot of it can happen with the comments. A lot of it happens with connections and direct messages, and then taking it in other arenas, into virtual chat rooms or into real life. I mean, that's where the real good stuff happens, right? When our LinkedIn relationships spill over into the real world.
How do you then, let's say you create this post, it goes to crickets, but then 3 people, hey, I read that, this is great. They make that connection. You start how much of the post do you count in the success ecosystem versus these other things that you mentioned? Because most people just look at the post and that's it.
Yeah.
So where's the factor? What should we be thinking instead of going, oh no, only 112 with 0? We can go, wait, it did this, but then I got this, and then I went into this, and then this. What are these things, and how important are they overall to long-term success?
That's a great question. And I don't have enough data to know the answer to that question, but I have some theories. I've developed a framework I call the 1-5-10, and I think of it as a baseline approach to LinkedIn engagement, where in a given week, if you can produce 1 thoughtful post, 5 generous DMs, and 10 substantive comments on other people's posts, you're doing all right. You are ahead of the game, and you are going to be making meaningful progress toward accessing the compounding benefits of building a presence on LinkedIn. And we do tend to over-index on the importance of the posts themselves. Now, I'll take a little detour here to say, when a post is just bombing, to what you say about crickets, Dennis, I will pull it back. But if it's not doing anything, if it's totally misbehaving, then maybe something is kind of askew. Maybe the hook is messed up. Maybe I used a visual that was not optimal. Maybe I posted at a weird time. I don't know. But I will pull it back. I will tweak, and then I'll try it again, just to say. So while I'm saying we don't want to attach our feelings of self-worth to how a given post performs, we also don't need to just let the thing float out there into oblivion to crickets. We can iterate in real time.
Absolutely. I mean, and if we think of it as an asset, if you invested $10,000 into an asset and it sat there for a year and got 0%, as a matter of fact, maybe even degraded a little bit, and now it's $9,700, sitting in that account, you might reallocate that asset to other areas or pull that money. And because I like to think of marketing very much in a investment sort of mind frame, because I think there's just so many parallels. Let's keep moving on, because I think me and you could talk for 5 hours. Sure. And this is the Mo Jogan show, where we're going to talk for 5 hours about marketing. So we're not going to do that, folks. Stay with us. It should be give us about 10 more minutes. But let me ask you this: how, in your mind, if I just ask this very simple question, how do I turn a post into a paying client? You're the Loda of LinkedIn land, right? So that's what we all want. We're not posting here to get likes and feel good about ourselves. We're posting here because we want to develop relationships that hopefully become business relationships that benefit both of us financially. So is there a formula? Is there a key? Is there a certain thing you look for from a person that if they do that in the comments, you reach out to them individually and cultivate? Like, what are the things that are the identifiers that you go, okay, this is how I'm going to turn posts into clients?
I'm going to do my best not to jump down a 5-minute rabbit hole here, but we're getting into the idea of social selling, which is a term that I would not have heard 4 years ago. I've been fortunate to get to learn directly from a guy named Darren McKee, who is, for my money, the best social seller in the world and on LinkedIn. And the way that we want to think that this works is that we post and then we get a flood of people who want to work with us or buy our thing, whatever that is. And the truth is it's probably more complicated than that, right? Yeah. I've made it a point, as I've grown my business and my presence here, to focus on demand generation rather than lead generation, where I'll tell people, if you want lead gen, I'm not your guy. I don't do it. I don't know how to do it. That said, I do have a fair amount of experience with building businesses and building brands on LinkedIn through this idea of demand generation, which is becoming the person who is known for that thing, that you become known as the guy, the gal, the human who solves this particular problem for this particular group of people. And if you can become that person, you're in business. So to your question, actually, about how do you take a post to a paying client, the way I think about it is you are a node in the network. Your posts are a way of sending out signals into the network. They're basically opportunities for people to see your message and respond. And what I'm looking for when I send a post out, like yesterday, I sent out a post saying, hey, I'm looking to fill some seats for my next boot camp. Who's in? Now, when I send that post out, I got a few DMs saying, me. I want to do it, right? Which is great. That
always.
A lot of the time, that's not how that works. Well, I'm looking for signals. I'm looking for folks who might send me a DM just saying something else, right? But if they fit that target client I'm looking for, I'm taking that as a signal. People, profile views. Like a lot of times people will check out your profile without saying anything to you, but that is a signal of interest. And then you've got things like your comments and your likes on the post. Somebody might say something nice in the comments. Somebody might give you a thumbs up. Whenever I see those things, I'm sending that person a DM just to say thanks, just to say hi, just to reach out. And it's by connecting those dots that we're strengthening relationships, that we're strengthening the bonds among nodes in the network. And that's how we close the gap between that post and a paying client.
Let me ask you, because we have all these venues, all these ways, all these platforms, and then we have an actual real job on top of it, right? Do you use VAs or Cleverly or any of these other like Auto or maybe a real person? Or are you literally just sitting there every day, 1, 5, 10, every day looking at your comments? And like, are you combing through these, or at the scale that you're at? And as we were talking to law firm owners, they don't want to sit there all day and wait. At the scale that you're at, what are some tools or things that you utilize that not just help with content, but really help with moving this process along?
It's a great question. So there's a tension that I feel on a daily basis where I am serious about authenticity, about being real, about just how mission critical it is to be developing real relationships in digital space, that's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. The tension between that and the fact that there are only 24 hours in a day. And to your point, we're not trying to be influencers. We're trying to build businesses. We're trying to build lives. We're trying to provide for our families, right? So to answer your question directly, how I handle it, I do have some support on my team of people who will help with, let's say, engagement support. That tends to be, I try to limit this, whether it's for me, whether it's for clients. And actually, I don't really do this for myself. For myself, it's all me. It's going to be all me. Mm-hmm. For my clients, we'll have folks support with, say, if somebody leaves a comment that's like fairly generic, then they'll help with those. Or just like liking the comment. Like you want to acknowledge just about every comment that's showing up on a post you put out there.
Okay.
So when it comes to doing that stuff, yeah. Or if you want to be connecting with people, like, so many in a given week, then getting help from a VA or from somebody on your team to do that, I think that makes a lot of sense. What I don't like, and I think is ultimately corrosive to a brand, whether your firm or your person, is having other people running around the internet pretending to be you, and also like dropping into people's DMs with generic messages or automated messages. I think that stuff isn't particularly effective. And I think for a lot of us, it's not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Do you think that there are certain sizes or approaches that it needs to be you versus it can be more of an, like, for example, with myself, I have 40 people on my team. We're putting out 165 or so episodes a month for our clients. I'm on 100, I'm guessing on 100 podcasts this year, plus have 2 of my own that I'm going to be doing weekly. So essentially the equivalency of 200 podcasts. So is there a point in, you're working with law firms, you're working with, I imagine, some PI guy who's got $50 million in the bank and thinks that, he rolls up in his Bentley and he doesn't have time to tie his shoes, let alone respond to somebody liking his post. With those types of individuals, do you just basically say, listen, if you can't be in there yourself and really do this, then maybe this isn't the avenue for you to use to cultivate clients?
Most of my clients are more interested in what I'm talking about with demand generation than lead generation. So there is a distinction there that matters, right? The clients I work with on the ghostwriting front, they see this as almost like another billboard, right? So it's a way to get your message in front of people in a more three-dimensional, a more human way, right? So like I said, we will help with light engagement support, but what I will tell clients is the more involved you are, the more present you are in your own inbox, in your own comment section, the more opportunity you have to create the connections that lead to new opportunities. So whether that's, getting more speaking opportunities, building relationships with new referral partners, whatever that is. If in a business that is, let's say, a more where lead gen is more important, which I tend to think of as you need more clients, right? So like my business, I don't need very many clients, right? I have a very specific type of lawyer I work with, and I just go hunting for those people, right? And I don't need very many of them, right? But if you're in a business where you need 100 sales this month or 1,000 this year, then the dynamics are a little different, right? Where I think automating some of that stuff or getting more help with some of that stuff, I don't like it. I don't think it's good. I actually think it sucks for the experience on the platform, and it's getting worse by the day. But I also get it. Like I understand that
it's like SEO versus buying PPC. You know they're jumping to the front. They probably aren't getting as good of results because what's the click-through rate on PPC? 1%, 2%, 3%. But at the end of the day, you realize because these people are trying to scale and grow that they've done that in order to help with that. Would that be a fair parallel to the approaches?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So Cricketeer has fallen silent. Loda starts talking, and Cricketeer, he's kind of scurried away in fear. But let's be honest, it's just for now, because this cycle will continue. You can either stay in the loop, or you can risk fading into the scroll. The scroll doesn't stop, but silence doesn't have to win. As long as Loda and his myriad of people that follow his philosophies are posting with purpose and others that parallel the same approach, LinkedIn's going to remain a place where connection happens, my friends. I'm Bandman. This is BAM, the show conquering sameness, one platform at a time.
BAM!